This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. Three, two, one. And welcome everybody to this episode of the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. I am your humble host, John Allen. It's late at night here in Norway, but it's early afternoon, late morning in California. Hello, Eric. How you doing, man?
Hey, good, John. How are you? It is 12:30, so yeah. Breakfast time.
You know, I'm used to having you West Coast folks on the podcast. I've actually done episodes in the middle of the night here in Norway to make it fit for the guests. So nothing new here. I'll do anything for a good guest, and you are a good guest.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
Good, man. You know, I've never spoken to. No, I take that back. I have spoken with one film writer before. But I've never spoken with someone who is as complex in their thinking and in their approach to a comedy film as you are. I got to tell you. Well, I have to tell you, Vice Force Action Squad had me laughing like no other comedy ever has. As a former police officer, watching the way those two detectives were handling things, the dialogue between them, the utter cluelessness at times that they had in situations where they really needed to have their shit together. It's just absolutely hilarious. So hats off to you for the writing and the direction and the writing and the direction on that film. Hats off to you.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate it. It was the impetus was kind of your tropes of detective shows. And it was just an approach. I don't even remember what the inspiration was other than. Because
I was going to ask you, where do you come up with this concept? Where did you come up with that idea?
I don't fully remember what started it. Oh, I just did. I had a roommate. My roommate is at the time was Mark, who's in the first two episodes as Detective Marcus Dahlhauser, and he and I would just had this relationship where we would. He knows how to push buttons, and I'm very susceptible to having my buttons pushed, and we would bicker like an old married couple. And a mutual friend of ours was like, this should be a web series, just you two. And then from there, it kind of became, us as, the idea I had was like, that's funny. What if you had these two as cops? And we actually went one Halloween as the kind of like, not these characters, but just a version of like, cop, 70s cop guys. Yeah. And that's when I was like, I think I'd already had the name too at that point, but nothing was written. And I was just thinking like, this is a funny thing. And I'm going to push through with it, and just started writing. So I guess the approach was kind of like, what if Starsky and Hutch were Beavis and Butthead? And that
what if Crockett and Tubbs were a couple of idiots and very uncool, very uncool?
It's Dumb and Dumber as homicide detectives. So, because I'm such a fan of like this stupid dumb comedy like that, like even if it's smart or it feels dumb, like Airplane's one of my favorite movies of all time, and the jokes are so obvious and dumb, but it's so funny. And Airplane was a big influence in the sense that like there's always something going on every moment of that movie, even if it's not. In the background, there's stuff. There's like, it's just wall to wall comedy. Well, not that I achieved Airplane, but that was the.
Well, but let me give this to you. The writing, I think, was brilliant. It was.
Thank you.
The things that they said and did was so stupid. I'm thinking it has to be a brilliant mind behind this writing. And I was talking to Bob earlier today, like I told you, and one thing that I told him was that when I watch a comedy, I can always tell that the actors know that they're acting in a comedy. But there's something about the acting in your program, your series, where I felt like the actors didn't have a clue that they were dumb. and that just made it more funny. Not that the actors were done, but that the characters were done, and that made it even more fun. It seemed like authentic silliness, authentic lack of competence in what they were doing.
To me, that's always very funny when you have characters who think they're the smartest person in the room, but everybody else knows they're not. And the more they hoist themselves, the harder the fall. Yeah. So, and it's like I mentioned Dumb and Dumber as an example, and that movie is so funny and it's so great, but like they have these moments of like inadvertent competency, and that was something I had wanted to play into with this too. Like in Dumb and Dumber, there's a great scene where they're being harassed by what's his name, Seabass, who's a hockey player, I guess, but not in the movie, but in real life. And then they get him to pay for their food, which is, if I don't want to spoil the movie for anybody, but it's very funny. But I just like that, like they get a win despite their complete incompetence. Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of that in life. A lot of times you just see people like, wait, how did they get to this point when they're obviously not capable?
They're obviously not capable, and yet somehow they succeed.
Yeah, and that was always the North Star of like winning despite great odds against them, but not in a underdog way.
Let me back up a little bit, Eric. Let me ask you, where are you from? Where are you born and raised?
Florida, Central Florida. Grew up, born in Daytona Beach. Grew up in Orlando. Was there until I moved here.
So what is it that brought you to California? Is it that classic, that almost cliche story of you just wanted to make it in Hollywood? Is that what brought you there? Or that was it.
Very much so. That was it.
And I call that like a cliche story, but to me, it's a very inspiring story because who actually does that? It takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of fearlessness to pack up and move there. Can you tell me a little bit about your story, about your journey to California?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's really like has a lot of twists and turns, but I guess in a way it did. I've always been interested in the arts, and like when I was in 7th grade, I wrote a really terrible, I found it a couple years ago, really terrible comedy play because I had been watching a ton of SNL for the first time in my life at this age.
Yes.
And I was like 12, and just was enamored by this style. So I wrote this like sketch play / because it was supposed to be performed. It would have just been a bad sketch comedy, like very bad.
There's no chance of salvaging it and using it today.
It's funny. I've thought about it and just shooting it, but verbatim as it was written by me at 12, just as an exercise. Mm-hmm. But then I'm like, that's a lot of resources to go into something that's going to be really atrocious. And it's a one-note joke. The joke is that a 12-year-old wrote this and the adult version of that person is filming it. So it's just, with filmmaking, you always have to, especially comedy is like filmmaking, you always have to weigh, is the joke worth the effort that's going to go into it? And it's like, if something's so one note like that, it's like, just tell people about it and you'll save a lot of money and time and effort.
So who were the people on Saturday Night Live at the time you were inspired by them? What years are we talking about? Oh
man, you're gonna age me.
Yeah, there you go. See, I'm sneaky. I'm sneaky.
There we go. This was the early 90s, early to mid 90s cast.
Okay.
Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler. I think still like Kevin Nealon was still around and John Lovitz and those guys. Were some. That was kind of like the prime, the Wayne's World era.
Yeah, those are some good years for SNL. Those are some good years for
SNL. The best years for SNL.
I think so. Yep. I agree.
I mean, you're always biased, but it's. Everybody's favorite music is what they heard.
Yeah,
when they're 15.
True. That's true.
And it never got any better.
Never got any better. Yep. Gosh, we're old.
I know. Even though that's not true. I mean, like, but I do think SNL has kind of had like has become not quite as smart as it used to be.
I can't relate to it anymore and you nailed it right there. That intelligence in the humor that they display seems to be gone. And
it's become a little more broad.
Well, to me, it seems like they're trying too hard. It's like they're trying to, I don't know, am I being mean if I say they're trying to cover up for a lack of talent? And I don't want to say they're not talented, but the level of talent is different now than it was. And I don't think this is my age and my way of thinking has changed so drastically. I just don't think there's the same level of talent. I just don't see it.
I think what it is like SNL used to be the cutting edge of comedy. And it was like, especially in its early days, everybody was trying to be them. And now it's become such an institution that
do we expect too much?
It's comfort food.
Okay.
So it's in the sense that, like, I mean, maybe this is a bad example, but maybe it's the best example. McDonald's. Like when McDonald's first came out, first expanded, everyone's like, McDonald's is awesome. Yeah. And now you're like, well, I just kind of feel like McDonald's. Yeah. It's not the best. Yeah. I mean, or any chain restaurant, is like that. Yeah. At one point it was the newest, hippest thing. And then you have success doing that. And the same goes for SNL, doing this thing. And then the rest of the world, whether the culinary world, the comedy world, moves past you. And then you are now an institution. And you can always go and you're going to get a good meal, but you're not going to, it's not something you're going to run home and tell people about.
Right. Now, I wonder if it has to do with the recruiting process to get the talent on there, because now it seems like everyone and their mother is putting out their own comedy special on Comedy Central or on Netflix. And maybe at one time SNL was kind of like a stepping stone to getting that special.
It's fun. I think SNL, I think the actual like talent on SNL is great. I just think that I think they're I don't want to say their hands are being tied, but there's an expectation of like, you're you're still the most visible high-end thing on television. Like this is still what people aspire to do. But because of that, like we're the Cheesecake Factory, we have a standard, and you could do something more adventurous and might be more interesting, but that's not what people come here for.
I see.
But if you watch, like Kyle Mooney is a perfect example. Kyle Mooney is so funny and so interesting. And I just saw his movie Brigsby Bear, which I don't know if you've seen it, but
I haven't seen
highly
that.
recommended.
No. Okay.
Highly recommended. Has a lot of his SNL co-stars in it. Like you can tell when he does his sketches on SNL, because like, especially the pre-recorded ones, because they're kind of weird. And that's the stuff I always end up liking the most. Like if they never do another game show, I'll be more than happy, even though those sketches turn out funny, sometimes, but they do sometimes, but yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to say they're not talented. I mean, they're the ones that are on the show and I'm not, so they must have more talent than me. But it's something. I don't know. Something has changed. Something has changed.
I think it's just it. Like I mean, I hate to be like I'm right, but I think I'm right in the sense that like it's become such an institution that it hasn't been able to grow, and with it, so it's like. Weekend Update is always going to have the same Weekend Update jokes. But now comedy is so prevalent, like you touched on earlier, you have 5, 6, 7 different late night hosts who are also doing the same thing.
That's right.
And it's interesting because you say there's so many comedy specials and stuff. For years I've been saying comedy is the new rock music, in the sense that like, from the inception of rock and roll, or at least since rock and roll groups like the Beatles up until, I don't know, 2010-ish, that's what young people did, is you picked up a guitar and you learned how to play guitar and you joined a band or something like that, and you sort of aspired to become a musician. And somewhere along the line, that kind of faded away, probably as rock music declined in popularity. people picked up comedy as the new sort of rock band. So like a comedy troupe is the new rock band. Online sketch comedy is the new equivalent of that.
Yeah.
So I think that there's just a lot more people doing it, and because of that, they're naturally seeing different, more cutting edge things. And so SNL, while it's still like the gold standard, it's not quite.
It's not the only big. It's not the only big thing out there anymore. Whereas,
but I would say it is the biggest thing, but it's because it's so big, it's not the most important thing.
Right. No, I don't know. I guess I'm a little old fashioned. I just miss the old days. Like you say, the early mid '90s, maybe even up until around '98, '99. I want to see Norm Macdonald back on Weekend Update. That's the standard right there for me.
I think also part of it is like you said, the people that they got went on to big careers, especially throughout the '90s. Like Will Ferrell is one of the biggest stars in the world, and and Mike Myers was at one point, and whereas this cast, it kind of feels like there's more outlets for people to express themselves, for comedians to express themselves, because there's so much more content online and on, there's like 500 scripted shows being made. Yeah. So it's a little easier, I shouldn't say easier. There's more opportunities for a comedian to like flex their muscle, express their voice. That's not SNL. That ties directly in with what I was saying about how there was a time where the best, most effective way to make it as a comedian was through SNL, whereas now that's not the case. I think it's just not the only path.
Exactly.
Anymore.
It's not the only path anymore. Whereas there was a time where it almost was the only path. Yeah.
Yeah, or at least the only path that'll get you in front of a lot of eyes.
Yeah.
But you look back and then, the state was, the state was funnier, more interesting, more cutting edge than SNL was at the time, even though SNL was great. But like, there's a lot of the states now in various forms.
There is.
So anyway, there's
back to
all right,
your time.
That's all the show we have for you.
No, hey, we got nothing but time here. But going back, okay, you're in Florida, and when did this desire to get to California first arise in you?
I would say right after, somewhere in my first couple of years in college, because I had left high school with every intention of being a psychiatrist. I was going to go all 8 years and, do the whole thing and become a doctor and, get my doctorate, I should say, in psychiatry. And after a year of college, because I was going to this community college near my house, and I hated it. And I didn't go straight to university. I don't want to do this. I don't want to spend 8 years in school. Yeah. So I decided to change my major. Ironically, the irony, the great ruler of my life.
You too?
Once I finished college for my 4-year degree, because I changed majors so much and because of the program I went through, I had been in school for 8 years. So I spent the same amount of time and got half the degree. Whatever. Yeah. It is what it is. But I kept changing majors. And that was why. I went from I was always interested in the arts. I mean, like I said, I wrote that play in 7th grade, and in high school I was in a band, and in early days of college in a band. Okay. And so it was always something always driven to the arts and driven to, so then after that, I knew I wanted to do something creative. So I kind of went into marketing as a career choice and as a path of study. And then I quickly realized that what I thought was marketing was actually advertising. So I was like, well, that was dumb. So then it became advertising as a course path.
That's a lot of changes, man.
It's a lot of changes. And in there, I had taken a class just on a whim, a screenwriting class, because I was like, I don't know anything about how this works. This will be interesting.
Yeah.
So I took that class and took to it immediately. I was like, I totally understand everything that's going on here. And the project that we had to do for the final project, I got the highest grade in the class. My teacher's like, this is very good.
Yes.
She's like, oh, maybe I'm onto something here, but maybe not.
So you didn't know, even then, you still didn't really know.
Even though I'm like, nah, I don't, we'll see. So, but then I had transferred to university and was in this advertising thing. And I was like, I don't really enjoy this. This is like, I like the creative aspect of it, but it just feels, I don't know, it didn't feel right. I didn't like the people.
Yeah.
And then around that time, I was like, I think I actually just want to go to film school. This is what I think I'm putting off. So the school where I went, it was like midway through college. So
so you had a couple. Yeah. Okay. So you had a couple years in college at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I most of my pre, I'd taken like a year off at one point too. It wasn't like I did classes straight for 8 years and then finally had enough for a degree. It was just a lot of like start and stop.
I see.
Trying to figure out,
So you were really undecided. Could it have been a case of you loving the arts, maybe even loving film or writing at that point, but you didn't recognize that love for that art as a career path, a potential career path?
I would say that's exactly what it is. Wow. And I think that I have come from a risk-averse parents and who wouldn't. It's funny because they were always like, I gave up on my dreams. Don't give up on your dreams. And then I want to do this. They're like, oh, what are you going to do if it doesn't work out? So prove them wrong. That's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
So finally, after that advertising stint, I realized, no, it's film. This is what I remember taking that class. I enjoyed that. So I started taking all the classes I could that were available to me, because the school I was at is University of Central Florida in Orlando. And I had known they had a good program because that's where the Blair Witch guys had gone.
Okay.
And
cool.
So, and this was probably like 5 years ahead of me, maybe 4 or 5 years ahead of there. So the school had a reputation at that point for being, hey, they produced these guys. So, but they had a limited access program where they only took like 30 people a year into their film program. So it's like, okay, I got to apply. So I got in the first try, and they're in school, but for there it was a 3-year program. So that's why it took so long. It was like, and I was enjoying it. Those are some of the best times of my life, those few years.
Was it?
School.
Yeah. Because you were with like-minded people and.
Yeah. And just good people. It was like, still like our Taylor, who's one of the actors in Vice Force. He was in film school with me. Our DP Scott was in film school too. A lot of people who worked on the show in various capacities.
I didn't know you and Taylor went back like that. I didn't know that.
Oh, we've been friends for 20 years now.
Okay.
So that's and Mark, who was in the first couple episodes, also in school with us. So that was how it started. It was like just a thing to do with friends, and kind of expanded from there. But yeah, those years were just fantastic. So it was just a natural next step after finishing school.
So how solid was your plan then when you went from Florida and you took the and you moved to California? How solid was your plan? Did you have any kind of a gig set up? Did you have any place to stay?
I did have a place to live because one of the guys I went to school with had already moved here. There was like a handful of people we'd gone to school with that moved here prior to that, a year to 6 months prior to that. And one of the guys, he and his roommate at the time were sharing a 1-bedroom apartment, and his roommate was moving out. So it was like perfect timing. I can go and stay with him and I have a place to live. So that was a big, that didn't require a security deposit, that didn't require a ton of rent, it was pretty cheap.
Because I was going to ask you about that, without digging too deep into your personal finances. There is a different cost of living between Florida to California. And then when you're going out there and you don't have a paid gig set up, to me, it takes a pretty adventurous guy to do something like that.
It does. And I had a nice benefit of personal savings that, because I was very lucky not having any student loan debt because I of three things. One is I worked throughout all of college, worked full-time most of it, part-time through all of it.
What kind of work? What kind of work?
Well, it's funny. I worked, when I first went to school, I was working in a grocery store, and it's like common, 18-year-old jobs.
Yeah.
And then after that is where I started a new gig, and it still fits in with this entertainment and something that's been a lifelong hobby, but also dream. So I started, not this specific dream, but I started working for Universal Studios there in the theme park, not the actual studio.
Okay.
And I have such a great love for theme parks. It's really, I would say my dream career is actually to be like an Imagineer or in a creative department in a theme park. I find that to be the ultimate expression of immersive entertainment.
I was just going to say.
I was actually at Disneyland yesterday. So.
Oh, were you? Okay, yeah. I went there with my family back in 2015, I think it was 2016. And if I ever see that mouse, I think I'm gonna choke him to death. He took so much money, so much of my money, and I didn't have as much fun as I thought I was.
I've been really blessed in that growing up in Orlando. You don't have to pay to go because somebody who works there.
You got the hookup, yeah.
But in Orlando, they employ like 60,000 people in Orlando. So somebody who at least knows somebody. So you can go. Maybe you're not going all the time, but you can go. But then when I started working there, it's free admission for you. So I started going to Universal Studios a lot. But then also you would meet Disney employees and you couldn't go to Disney for free. They couldn't go to Universal for free, but you just trade.
Yeah.
So I started going a lot. And then right around the same time, my mom started working for Disney and continues to this day. So I've just been going for free for a very long time. Long time. I'm very blessed. And I know it's for people who don't have that, it's the value of theme parks is completely ruined for me because I'm $100. This isn't worth $100. It's worth $0. That's what I pay.
No, I joke about how much money we spent when we were there, but it was a good time for the kids, and that was what was most important to me. So. Yeah. It
is very expensive. It is. And it's increasingly more expensive. And I have a lot of theories as to why, but we don't have to get into that if you don't want to. But it's a grand economic theory.
Let's talk about that. Let's take a sidestep here.
We're getting far from the show, but that's okay.
No, we'll come back. We will come back to it. But why do you think it's so expensive there?
Make
me feel better for spending all that money I spent there.
I'm not going to make you feel
You're not going to make me.
This is a depressing theory. Basically, it's this. Since the late 70s, early 80s, since the Reagan administration, wage growth has become very stagnant in this country.
Yes, it has.
And the income disparity is growing and growing and growing. The middle class is shrinking. So now you have Gen Xers, millennials, Zennials, as I am, younger millennials who have now grown up with this as part of their lives, and an entire culture has grown up around Disney and stuff. So it's a normalized part of your life. It's not like a vacation destination, but especially for people who live within proximity of these, which is sorry, my light just turned off. It's also it's a normal part of your life, but they also, because of that income, the stagnation, don't have money, the income needed to buy a home.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people who can't buy homes. So when you're a renter and you don't have the money to buy a home, but you still have disposable income that is not enough to buy a house, but is more than what you need, what do you spend it on? Entertainment.
There you go.
So, so now movie tickets have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Theme park admission has skyrocketed. Why? Because there's more of a demand for it. Because, you know, people 30 to 40 have disposable income that they can't put towards.
Yeah, it's not gonna go towards a home. People are stressed, so what do they need? That entertainment outlet. And there's the theme park and
the escapism of movies and just entertainment in general is so appealing. So now the parks have a limited supply and high demand. So how do you control the supply when the demand is so high? You have to start making your supply more expensive.
Make it more exclusive.
Otherwise, make it more exclusive. I mean, partly, they're making a ton of money. I'm not saying Disney are altruists, but you also have to limit the number of people within the park to make it for the people who are there to have some sort of perceived value. Yeah. Because at 100,000 people, it's a much different experience than if there's 50,000 people in that park.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's probably the main reason why I didn't enjoy being there at Disney as much as I thought I would, because it was so doggone crowded. And it got to be a stress factor very quickly. It's kind of, learning. I had 4 years of working in a theme park, and I eventually did work at Epcot too. So I worked for both big theme park companies simultaneously, actually. Or no, I didn't. I'm sorry. They didn't overlap. It doesn't matter. But one thing you learn is like very quickly when to go, because don't go around major holidays. Don't go in the summer. Basically between Memorial Day and Labor Day, forget it. Just stay home. This was in
go to the beach.
This was in late September 2016 when we were there. So it wasn't really the high season at all.
Yeah.
But it was
Did you go on a weekend? Weekends are also
I can't remember. Can't remember if it was a weekday or weekend. Can't remember.
If I was a parent, I'd be like, we're going on a Tuesday. You're gonna take the day off of school. I'll pretend you're sick, and we're going on a Tuesday in the middle of February or November pre-Thanksgiving, where it's just slow and you can get the most enjoyment out of it. Because there were days when around Thanksgiving or Christmas, I worked at Universal where it was brutal. How your day, it was so busy, and then there'd be days like right after the first of the year, mid-January, it was just you just sit there all day. There was almost nobody.
Well, I have to say this: the employees they knew their job, and they knew how to make you feel welcome, and they knew how to put on that happy face and make it was a good experience. Yeah, in that aspect of it, but it cost way too much for what it was, I think, and it was way too crowded. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, everybody's has a different sort of like.
Now we've been there. We've been there. We've done it. The kids have that experience, and like I said,
being in Norway. Did you ever go to like Efteling or? I mean, it's not in the same country, obviously, but it's closer. What's the other one? That's in. There's two like really great non-Disney parks in Western Europe, and I'm trying to remember what the other one was. One is Efteling, and that's in. I gotta look it up.
Efteling. I don't think I've heard of that.
Efteling. It's in the Netherlands.
Okay. Yeah.
It's near. It's supposed to be fantastic, and.
Yeah, I don't. I haven't gotten around too much. There's been, I've been here in Norway for 19 years now, and there's been so much to experience here. I'll give you a good example. We live in the southeast, along the coast in the southeast, but we also have a home. I'm looking at the map. Yeah, if you look at Drammen, Dramen.
Oh yeah, I see it.
Okay, that's the city we live in. But then, if you go a 2-3 day car drive north, all the way up to a region called Finnmark, an island called Seiland. That's Seiland. Take a look at Seiland.
Let's see where this is.
S as in Sam. Eilan for November. D.
Is it north or south of
North.
Bodo?
North. North of.
I'm trying to.
North.
But Bodo? Is it pronounced Bodo?
No, Bude.
Oh, I was close. Is it near Hammerfest?
Hammerfest is if you go.
That sounds like an awesome festival.
It's I'll tell you about. I'll tell you about Hammerfest.
I know it's a town, but
if you go kind of south and along the coast towards the southwest, you'll see another island called Seiland. It's almost right next to it. It's one island over from Hammerfest. Seiland.
Oh yeah. I see it.
So way up there, that's like if you take it easy, it's like almost a 4-day car drive. We also have a home up there. So now you kind of get that image of there being more than enough to experience here in Norway.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
We have two totally different, there's two totally different dialects of Norwegian that they speak. You have the Laplanders, the Sami people, up there is where you're going to see reindeer and stuff like that. So it's a totally different experience than living down here in the city. So
yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I've spent a little bit of time in Norway, in Epcot.
Okay, yeah.
So I know what you're about.
There you go. Yeah, you've seen it all. You've been to Epcot. You've seen it all.
I always wonder, like, how I know that in Epcot these are like extreme distillations of the experience of living in this country, but I always wonder how accurate of a distillation are they?
I've never been to Epcot, so I couldn't tell you. But if you told me you saw this, that, or the other at Epcot, then I can tell you if it's really that way here.
I don't remember. It's been a while. But I mean, they have, I feel like they have what seems like authentic food for each country. And I know they
probably do.
Those pavilions because they're basically pavilions in a fair. That was kind of the idea behind it. But they staff it with people from Norway or China or Denmark or not Denmark. They don't have a Denmark pavilion, Morocco or wherever. So it's like these are they're people from that country who are representing it and not,
From what I understand, it's fairly accurate. I've spoken to some Norwegians who have worked there before. And from what I understand, it's fairly accurate. But it's, I've been here 19 years. And I'm still fascinated. I still can't believe I'm here. It's just been a constant adventure. It's so cool to be able to speak the language.
What drew you to there?
Well, you see this ring here?
Yes.
That's
you found that ring in Norway?
I found the ring in Norway, yeah.
No, it's just on the ground.
It was just on the ground, man. Like I say to people, I met my wife on a Friday night. I woke up with a headache on Sunday, and I was in Norway already. Oh, wow. We got introduced by a common friend, another Norwegian lady who had moved to Chicago, where I was living. And this lady moved from Norway to Chicago, and she was a girlfriend to one of my best friends, a training partner. I had another power lifter. And this woman started talking right away about my wife and how I should meet her. And push came to shove, we finally ended up meeting when my wife came to visit her, and here we are. We got married. We got married about a year after we met. We lived in the States for about 18 months. And then we came here in 2002.
What was your decision to leave the U.S. born out of more, do you think your desire or hers?
It was born out of necessity. I can tell you real quick. Now, all my viewers and listeners are familiar with this story. But like I said, I was a cop in the south suburbs of Chicago. And I was working a case as a detective. And this pretty rough, somewhat international gang, they all kinds of stuff with drugs, weapons, prostitution, counterfeit money, all kinds of stuff that these guys were involved in. And they found out where we lived, and they paid us a little visit one night. It was like 11:30 at night, and we get a phone call.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, got a phone call 11:30 at night. We had just gone to bed. Got a phone call from a neighbor saying that she saw 3 guys climbing the fence in our backyard and headed up to our house. So fast forward to the day after, they about 20 of them showed up at my wife's job, threatening her. And then the day after that, the morning after that, I drove her up to Minnesota to stay with some friends. She ended up coming back to Norway, and I followed her about 3 months after that. I just quit my job, and here we are. So it was kind of born out of necessity. It was not in the cards. It was not planned in no way whatsoever. So it was kind of rough to come here. Kind of rough. But
you like it there now.
Well, yeah, I like it now, but I got my head around being here rather quickly. I got a job. I got a job, as a matter of fact, before I could even speak the language. So. Oh wow! Yeah.
Have you sent that international gang a thank you note?
I have seen that several of them got locked up then, and several of them have gotten locked up since then. Now, my mother worked in the federal court system. And at one point, the Secret Service got involved because of the money crimes, the counterfeit money. Yeah. So it became federal, and my mother was familiar with the case, and she kind of kept me filled in for some years there. And it felt good to see them, 1 and 2 at a time getting locked up for pretty long stretches. Yeah.
Oh, that's I bet you that was satisfying.
It was satisfying, but. I try not to be a shoulda, woulda, coulda type of guy, but
yeah.
But yeah, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Like it was not planned to come here, but I made the most of it, and things are doing fine here. The kids are well; they're healthy.
Sounds like it. That's great.
Yeah.
I can. When you said you got a job without speaking the language, was it in your field, or did you?
No, because at that time of course, I wanted to get into police work.
I guess you'd have to speak the language in order to be a cop.
Well, yeah, and you also have to be a citizen of Norway to be a cop.
Oh, so, that makes sense.
But what I did was I got recruited to do some project work at a high school, where I started a project that I ran to keep kids out of the danger zone. Kids that were like right on that fine line between criminal action and just basic delinquency. And so I got a job doing that.
It's funny, as an American, I don't think of Norway as being a place that has criminals, but obviously it does. Everywhere does. But it just seems like sort of an idyllic paradise. And you think of crime as like uniquely American, or at least in other like countries like Colombia or where they have sort of like a reputation in fiction for being dangerous, but it is somewhat idyllic here. It is somewhat storybook peaceful here. There is crime, but it's not. But there's nowhere in Norway where I would feel uncomfortable walking at night. That just doesn't exist. I'm sure
that doesn't exist.
It's sort of like a short-sighted to think of it as a crime-free utopia, whereas every place has its it's fun. Just that American lens that you see everything through is it is different. It does not present an accurate representation of the rest of the world.
Well, it's quite amazing to me, and I'm still not used to the and I don't want to say anything bad about my fellow Americans, but sometimes we're just dumb. Sometimes we're willfully dumb. We don't want to learn about anyone else that's outside of the borders of the United States. And let me tell you, being here all these years has really given me perspective. It really has. Sure. I thought I had perspective before, but now I've gotten perspective, and I see what's happening back home, and I tell you, it breaks my heart. It's heartbreaking to be way over here and see what's been happening. It's horrible. It's horrible.
It's I think that we have. I mean, obviously, we have our school curriculum is so America first and almost America only. Like, there are other places that exist, but we're far superior to all of them. but also just our like physical geography has made us so isolated from the rest of like the world, because it's so expensive to travel to Europe or travel
I was going to say, and that fact, the fact of the expense of traveling outside of the United States is what makes me say, yeah, I get it. You know, America's a big country. Yeah. You could compare California and Florida to Norway and Romania, for example. You know, as far as distance,
in terms of distance, but in terms of culture, they're virtually identical.
Right, virtually identical.
In a vast spectrum. Sure. You know, there's differences between them, but like Californians and Floridians are much closer than Norwegians and Romanians are culturally. Obviously, being from the same from the same country.
But distance wise, you know, it's comparable. And, I see that, and I can handle America first, but there's too much of that America only, like you said, to where. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a sad thing to see, and I guess I'm cursed with perspective, and that makes me feel,
or blessed with it. I mean, I would say that you're, being able to step outside and have that lens on just that different perspective is invaluable, because we are very much made to feel and think that this is the norm in what we experience in this country, and everybody else has a different yet inferior experience.
Well, exactly.
And it's really born out of like this myth of a war, or a myth of war, and of moral superiority military superiority equaling moral superiority,
right,
and just this myth of like we're the heroes that save the world from the Nazis, and like
we are that. But what have we done with that? Have we borne that that status, or have we borne that accomplishment honorably since then? And my answer is no, we haven't. We're a bunch of assholes.
I think exactly. I think for a time, the period of the like 15-year period from the end of World War II to the time we landed on the moon was like this boom time of, that was the best that America had to offer, even though within our country, it was not to everybody. I mean, in terms of like financial, social finances, like our middle class was huge. Yeah. There was a lot of room for growth for people, but the way this country treated people of color, treated people of different sexualities during that time doesn't equal this sort of like social progress.
Yeah, there's a heck of a duality there. For all of the fiscal prosperity, there were some social issues that really, really were.
Yeah, there was a lot of opportunity for white people.
Yeah,
And it's weird because sometimes I just think like, oh, the Civil Rights Act, hugely important in the history of Black Americans, only 60 years ago.
Yeah.
It feels like, the Supreme Court legalizing gay marriage. Oh, this feels normal now. It was only a decade ago. Like,
right, exactly.
And we've made progress, but it has not. It's been very recent.
It's been very recent, and it hasn't seeped into the fabric of America yet. There's some people walking around today who feel that because the civil rights laws were passed, 55, 60 years ago, that now everything has been fine and dandy since then, and it hasn't. People need to get a connection to the realities of what's happening in America. Just because it says this, that, or the other on paper, because of laws that have been passed, that does not mean that the equality has seeped into the fabric of our society, because it hasn't.
Not at all.
It hasn't.
Not at all. There's progress being made, but it's progress that should have been made 30 years ago.
Amen.
We're still behind.
Amen.
And the good thing is a lot of it, and this is going to sound self-important, but it's not. A lot of it is changing rapidly within the microcosm of entertainment in Hollywood. I hate using Hollywood as like a catch-all for entertainment. But
I'm glad you're bringing this up. I wanted to ask you about this, so please continue. Yeah.
Well, having better representation in our entertainment leads to it being normalized throughout our culture. And I hate that entertainment drives our culture, and I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to sound self-important, but it's the reality of it.
But I think you should also take credit for it. You say you don't want to sound self-important, but I do believe that those of you who are working in Hollywood should take the credit. You guys have broken ground. You guys do show the way very often in your storytelling. You're showing people the way to true equality, true social equality.
I wish all of it I could say was out of born out of like a responsibility, a sense of responsibility, but also true like equality and wanting to, make sure everybody's voice is heard and not financial, but
right. Yeah, there is that. Yeah.
It's still a business.
But the thing is it's become popular to hate on Hollywood. I can give you a very recent case. Just yesterday, I was in a little back and forth with someone who, it's been less than a week since Tom Hanks wrote an article in the New York Times talking about the Tulsa massacre. And Tom Hanks was talking about how it's a shame that he didn't know that until very recently. He didn't learn anything about it in school. And he was just speaking on that. He wrote a very good piece on that. And this other guy was like, hey, you know what? Screw Tom Hanks. He's got a piece of shit son who does this, that, and the other. And I'm sick of Tom Hanks playing holier than thou. And I just don't understand that. Because I see someone who is an ally in my fight for equality. Mm-hmm. Someone who's being a good ally who wrote this beautiful piece in a major newspaper. I got nothing but love for the guy. And this thing about his son using the N-word repeatedly and all that stuff. First of all, I didn't know anything about that. So it's probably, who knows if there's any truth in that. But if there is truth in that, what does it have to do with Tom Hanks being a great ally in the fight for equality? But that's that thing that's popular with this hating on Hollywood now. It's become so popular, especially in the last 4 years.
I think not only exclusive to Hollywood, it's just the internet social media creates a culture I shouldn't say creates a culture, makes it easy to express these feelings of anger and dislike and disgust without having to actually answer to your feelings. It's funny, and I hate to bring this guy up, but because he's become such a piece of crap, but Louis C.K., who is one of the biggest disappointments to me, because he was a force for good, even though he has this like in instances like that, but he still has this like problem that I don't think he addressed in the right way, and he kind of doubled down on his horribleness. But anyways, that being said,
is that how you see it, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the guy like had an opportunity. It's funny because like I don't want to get too much into it, but the story that led to his sort of like cancellation was known. Yes. I'd heard it from more than one source.
Yes.
Years prior to this.
People knew.
People knew. So when Me Too, when that reckoning came about, all of these past instances could now be talked about in a more public sense. And he issued an apology statement, and he sort of slinked into the background. So you had one of two options there. You could own up to it and say, I'm going to make this right by, I don't want to say embracing, but owning your mistake and trying to educate people and saying this was wrong and you shouldn't do this.
But didn't he do that? Didn't he do that? Wasn't that a part of his apology?
It was in his statement, but the first show he does, he goes out and starts making rape jokes, and like on this like anti-cancellation crusade. It's like, dude, all you had to do was own it and say, I made a mistake, and I want to make sure other people don't make the same mistake, because he has so many bits about, like there was a line on his show where he had these kids, and his kids were like these two daughters, and the one was like, "Oh, such and such has more in her bowl," and
I've seen.
Says, the only time you should worry about what's in somebody else's bowl is if your neighbor has enough, basically. So it's like these ideas, which are altruistic and positive for the world, are sort of, you could have just leaned into that, but instead got mad and said, I don't deserve this treatment, and has now lost everything because of it. And I forgot.
But did he say that, or did his supporters say that? Because I didn't see anything where he said he didn't deserve what he got. Also, and I'm not there, and I don't know anyone who knows him, but my impression through the media was that he apologized. He said it was wrong. He realized he has a problem. He hopes he didn't hurt anyone. He also said that up through the years, because like you said, this had been going on for quite a while, he had approached a couple of these ladies and apologized and made things right with them. And then he went away, and then his supporters started to say he doesn't deserve to be canceled. Give the guy a break, and so on and so on. But did he actually say that himself?
I feel like he did, but I don't remember when or where, how, and it's so.
I'm not defending his action. I'm not defending his action. I mean, what he did, it was a piece of shit move. It was a piece of shit move what he did. But I guess my question is when people do things like what he did, can they be forgiven, and do they deserve a shot? And how long should that take?
I think you can, but you have to, in my mind, you have to own it. You have to apologize sincerely, and you have to make more of an effort to rectify it than what went into the actual the act or whatever.
I guess I look at it like, how do we know what he said and did behind the scenes to his, I don't want to call them victims, to the victims of what he did. What did he say to them? Because in part of his written statement, he did say that he had already approached some of them years ago. I don't know, and we probably never will. Yeah.
But just to here's what I think. If he had done so, how was this still become known? I mean,
that's a good point.
The sense that,
that's a good point.
Somebody still had a vendetta.
Somebody was still,
or maybe not vendetta, or still, felt hurt. I shouldn't say vendetta, because that's,
or hurt, or whatever you want to say,
and rightly victimized.
Sure.
So, and if it was somebody who wasn't there, it's kind of hearsay just because they didn't experience it. But I don't think that's what happened, because I don't think that something could reach the level that it did if it was secondhand information.
Yeah, that's true.
It's
good points.
So anyways, I forgot what were we talking about before this?
I was talking about good old kind-hearted Tom Hanks, and then you talked about piece of shit Louis C.K.
Yeah, what led us to this though?
What I was getting at was why did
I bring him up? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, how did that come in? No, I don't know. What I was getting at though was this thing that's become popular for people on the right to it's the knee-jerk reaction. It's the go-to reaction to hate on all things Hollywood. But I see a lot. Of course, there's a lot of strange things that happen in Hollywood. But I see a lot of positive. I see a lot of positive for society there. I see some groundbreaking things happening in film.
I think also what happens is, I mean, and I hate to be so generalized and so anti, but I see a lot on the right is what a lot of misinformation guides sort of belief systems, and there is a culture of grievance.
Yep.
That was, and there are institutions that are sort of right-wing focused.
Yes.
That are capitalizing on driving this culture of grievance and anger. And so when you have something like this comes out that Kevin Spacey and Bryan Singer are part of a pedophilic sex ring, that this becomes representative of the industry in its entirety, and that's when you get Hollywood is full of pedophiles. Hollywood is not. There's, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people who work in the entertainment industry who are just normal people, and who have, and everybody has, positive, good, and bad within them, but like most people are not. They're not pedophiles passing around children, and it's like, but that becomes these indefensible acts. Then, I mean, it's always like this throughout history. It's like right after 9/11, there were 12 hijackers who committed this atrocity and a support network that got them there. But there are millions of Muslims across the world who are just normal people,
exactly,
and who are religious to whatever extent that they, they're not zealots,
right? Exactly,
who are going to and they end up taking the brunt. And I'm not at all comparing, this that attitude towards Hollywood is the same, but it's similar in the sense that like, not everybody is like this, but the perception is everybody is like this from the people who don't want to look at it with a more objective eye.
Yeah. That perception is far from genuine. I believe there's news media outlets that are pushing BS like that for their own profit. Mm-hmm.
Totally.
And damn the consequences, they don't care. They're looking at their profit. They want those viewers.
Like Fox News's biggest star couldn't have settled a $32 million sexual harassment lawsuit, not his first, without being extremely wealthy enough that $32 million is not going to put you.
You're talking about Bill O'Reilly, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like, so there is a lot of money in this, in preying on and perpetuating this grievance culture, and it obviously has led to violence on the streets. Yeah,
and I tell you again, being an expat, being way over here and watching all of this happen, it just breaks my heart. It's this weird thing, and it's almost like some sort of syndrome that expats, at least expats over here who I've spoken with, it's a syndrome where we feel responsible. But helpless. We should be doing something. We should be saying or doing something to contribute.
Do you think that you have some form of survivor's guilt?
I think so. I think that's what.
Like you got out, and I don't have to deal with this. But there are a lot of people who. So I mean, I'm not. Obviously, it's.
I think so. Yeah, but I think it's
some version of it.
Yeah, I think there's a version of it. It's. I call it some sort of expat syndrome. Yeah, and it's akin to survivor's guilt. But it's gotten me both in a lot of trouble, but it's also given me somewhat of an advancement here. I've become one of the go-to people when anything big happens in the States. George Floyd or January 6th. The national news media has been coming to me and giving me a chair and letting me speak on national TV and stuff, and that's an honor, and that's
also
humbling.
Bears a big weight of responsibility.
Thank you.
I can imagine, and
I take that responsibility. And I can carry a load. I'm a champion powerlifter, so I can handle some weight. But I would rather be put me in the spotlight for something else. I wish I could be in the spotlight for something else instead of the go-to guy when crazy shit happens in America. Then they come and talk to me. It's sad. It contributes to the syndrome.
Yeah, I can see that, and it's sad that there's so much, as you said, crazy shit. I mean, the last 4 years were most tumultuous of my existence, and
mine as well.
And you just wonder, like, how does a country that is known for being this like stable, government and stable, like, I don't know, I guess that's not, there's no better term for it, get to the point where it could put a game show host who's not even a smart game show host and has no experience in any form of leadership in the most important position in the world.
I think that he and his minions have ruined America to the point that I believe that I will go to my resting place without having seen America recover from his 4 years. I truly believe that. I think we're in for some rough times.
I agree. But the thing is, it's not because of him. He's just a symptom of it. And I feel like the symptom, the real disease is this like idea of the American dream is sort of a thing of the past because of the economics of this country, where like there's stagnation for the middle class. Yeah. And it feels like there is, unless you are lucky enough to somehow escape out of it there's no sense of upward mobility anymore. And that sense of like, and then on top of it is white grievance, and where there's still like, it's not like white supremacy is limited to fanatics. It's permeated throughout our culture. And as it's starting to change, and it's changing only because of the internet and social media, which is it's giving people access to information, but also exposure to other mindsets. Yeah. So it's changing so rapidly that the sort of like white establishment, and I don't mean establishment in like a, New World Order elitist kind of sense, but just within the culture of like white is the default, as it changes just slightly, it's not made huge strides. It's gotten a little, but that there is a sense of like, I didn't have to work for anything, and now I do, and that makes me angry. Yeah. And and like, not to say, I mean, you encounter so many people, and you introduce the idea of white privilege, and they're like, I'm poor and not privileged, and they don't understand that like you have had, even though you don't have much, it's been easier for you to have that than it would have been if you were a person of color. And
they're at least not suppressed because of the color of their skin. Therein lies an enormous amount of privilege. Yeah.
Even if it doesn't have to be as extreme as like you were, beaten or shot by police, or you experienced a cross in your yard. They don't understand that, like, even just not having a shop owner follow you around the store with their eyes while you're in their shop is an example of this, of being privileged.
I tell you, the microaggressions, the micro racism is there's a bigger, it almost shouldn't be called micro because it has a huge effect on the daily lives of so many.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you add 1 million of these up, and then you have just such a different experience. And our individualism within the country, instead of collectivism, doesn't allow, within our own culture, doesn't allow us to, I shouldn't say doesn't allow us, has made it difficult for us to look at the experience of others and go, oh, they're not having it, it's not, they're not being treated fairly, and they're not being treated even in a welcoming sense.
I think America got real selfish over the last 4 years, and I agree with you. Trump was not the cause of it. He's a symptom of something that was already. I think there was
there was an existing president who was the cause of it. A previous president, I should say, who was. The decisions made during their administration have led to so many of our problems right now.
You talking about Bush or Reagan?
Reagan.
Okay. Yeah.
Reagan, who is hailed who is deified amongst even moderate conservatives.
Yeah.
His
economic policies is what brought us to this. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. People need to check their history. People need to check their history, because that's quite true. Reagan was not the savior.
No, not at all. It's the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
Defunding mental institutions has led to an enormous boom in homeless populations. Yep. Right now, Los Angeles is facing we're in a full-on crisis when it comes to homelessness in our community.
Tell me about it, because I hear people talking about how you can't go anywhere. It used to be that the homeless were kind of they congregated in certain areas of Los Angeles, but now people are saying you can't go anywhere without the homelessness being right in your face. Is that right?
There's still areas like I'm not wealthy at all. I mean, I'm renting an apartment, but my building is in the middle of a nice neighborhood. I'm adjacent to a very nice neighborhood. You don't see it. I mean, you may see occasionally somebody moving up and down the street. However, Venice, which is, a seaside town of very expensive homes, but not necessarily the suburban utopia that is Sherman Oaks, is having an insanely bad crisis in homelessness, where they're having fires that are being set, that they've actually have a I don't want to say mobile fire unit, because that's what all fire trucks are, but like a smaller version of a fire truck that's can get around more quickly, more easily, and it has like a small tank on it, so they can go and put out tiny fires. And they've had to it's basically smaller than an ambulance but bigger than a pickup truck.
Okay.
And they've had to utilize this in order to help put out these, because they can respond faster with this. What is it, like vehicle.
Little campfires being lit by the homeless?
And there's, and unhoused people tend to accumulate, I hate to say it, trash, but a lot of the stuff is heavily flammable. There's not a real concern with safety, because when you don't have things to lose, you don't have the same, if a fire breaks out in my kitchen, I'm going to freak out and use a fire extinguisher and put it out. But I have bear the responsibility of not only my own belongings, but that of my landlord. And I think that there's just less of a sense of personal responsibility that understandably comes from being unhoused, and also probably just an anger of you got to this point because your government doesn't ensure that you are safe.
See, and there's one of the things about, I talked about perspective. I never really thought too much about this when I was living back home, but here, where I can experience, for example, I've had 7 or 8 shoulder surgeries, and more recently a neck surgery. That stuff would have bankrupted me. Well, I mean, I wouldn't have gotten the surgeries, because there would have come a point to where I would have lost my job, because I wouldn't have been able to work, and the medical bills would have bankrupted me. So here, that's just not an issue. You just don't have to think about that. So you want to talk about perspective, because when I then see that the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States is unpaid medical bills. And when I see that the people on the right don't want to expand, there's no reason why the self-proclaimed greatest country on earth should not be taking better care of its people. So there's the perspective I get. Tiny little Norway, and I can have a standard of living where at least I don't have to worry about bankruptcy because of medical bills, because everything's free, because we're willing to pay the taxes to make it that way. So.
And that's the issue it's a country born out of anti-taxation. I mean, literally, that's why the country exists. It's baked into our culture and our capitalist system, whereas the accumulation of wealth is sort of the driving force behind so many people. It both prevents people from paying more taxes, but also we have a for-profit healthcare system which makes so much money and so much profit is not incentivized to do away with it. I mean, and I understand the difficulty of how do you eliminate a part of your economy that is a huge part of your economy? How do you just outright bar it? Which is what you'd have to do to move to a socialized system. I think that if any president, any administration was being honest, they would say, look, Medicare for all is our goal, but this is at least a 10-year process.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be in office to see it through, but as long as we start on this path, we can get there.
I don't, gosh, now I'm depressed. but it all goes back to what I say about perspective, you know, and in being over here and living the way I live here, and then seeing how way too many people are living back home because of that sense of American elitism, because of that right-wing stubbornness. It's heartbreaking. It doesn't have to be that way.
But also it's not exclusive to the right, the drive to make money and to stay on top financially.
It's not.
I think that there's a progressive left which is gaining traction, which wants to see, you know, socialized medicine, which wants to see education. Well, some people want it to be free. I think even just for coming back to my educational experience, which I didn't talk fully about how I got out of school, 8 years of school with no student debt, partly because, like I said, I worked the whole time, but a lot of it had to do with school was cheap when I was there. I spent $2,000 a semester on classes and books, and like that's nothing compared to what it is now. And that was a public state university, and which was a commuter school, which I didn't have to pay to live on campus. And I mean, and on top of that, I am very privileged in the sense that, like, when I was born, I had a great aunt who set aside a mutual fund for me. Okay. And, you know, so 20 years of that, that growing. Now, and it was not an enormous amount of money, but it allowed me to, you know, put down payments on a couple cars and pay for schooling and still have enough left over and pay for me to make my student film and to live off of after I moved here. I mean, I stretched out for a long time. It's not the only thing. It was still, I paid for most of my school through scholarships and my own savings, but it helped a lot. Yeah. That being said, without it, I might be $10,000 to $12,000 in debt for student loans. I know people who are, you know, close to $100K, and like that's ridiculous. And they went to the same school as I did. It's crazy.
It's just nuts. And again, the self-proclaimed greatest nation on earth cannot do better for its citizens. Come on. And that's you've saddled now an entire generation is saddled with student loan debt, which, like I said, has precluded them from home ownership. So they're just dumping money into entertainment because there's there's nothing to sort of like aspire to that is that costly. I mean, you know, so the entertainment companies are making enormous amounts of money. Don't let any of them fool you. Nobody is hurting. But is that being passed down to the lower levels? Absolutely not. Oh, really?
Absolutely
not.
Yeah. No, it's all at the top. And it's always, and this is true throughout American industry, the first people that have to sacrifice, it's always at the bottom. When there's layoffs, it's always at the bottom. And when there's you know, it's not solely the bottom, but that's where the majority of it comes from.
Right. How bad are things in California now? If I listen to the talking points of the right, it's a hell. It's a hellhole over there. I can't believe that's true. But again, I don't know because I don't know anyone who's there.
Here's the thing. It's still, no matter how bad it's being made out to be, it's still one of the best places in the world to live. You know, there's like, we don't face daily fears of being kidnapped or persecuted or murdered. No one's getting abducted off the streets because of their, I mean, people are, you know, there's obviously children like that. That's this stuff that's always existed, but it's not, it's not, we're not living like Israel just had and continues to have with almost open warfare on the streets between Palestinians and the Israelis, Jewish Israelis. which because of Netanyahu sort of like boiled over into violence on the streets. Now, but we are experiencing, Asian Americans are experiencing this because of these randomized attacks because of the pandemic, and so much of it was fueled by when your president goes out there and says, this is calls it the China virus. And this is because of China, and Americans aren't smart enough. I shouldn't say aren't smart enough. Haven't taken the time to go, oh, an Asian person I see, I can't tell the difference between whether they're from Japan or China or Modesto.
Now you were saying earlier, everything that we're experiencing today is not Trump's fault, and that's true. I agree with you, but he most certainly has made things much worse than they should be.
He exacerbated the problem intentionally.
He was so narcissistic. I mean, I don't think the man has a heart that beats. I think he's got a lump of coal there. How he is able to say and do the things that he does, and then just lean back and watch the results of that, and not feel an ounce of guilt, it's just it fascinates me. It's fascinating that he can be that kind of a human.
It is terrifying that, and then to spend 3 years, it was 3 years in office, and not have a major crisis, and then have the biggest crisis in a century, prolonged crisis. I mean, I think 9/11 was probably a bigger crisis, but it was so acute compared to the pandemic. And then fail at it so miserably out of sheer apathy and negligence. Like, he killed 500,000 people out of just not.
And I'm glad you say it that way. I say it as well, that he killed 500,000 people. His inaction directly led to immense suffering. And again, that he can do those kind of things and lean back and it's all fine and he's not apologetic in the slightest bit. It's absolutely fascinating that kind of a human being exists.
For him to get vaccinated himself and not come out publicly and say, this is safe, you should do it. Yeah. And instead drive this grievance culture because it will benefit him people like to think that he's playing some kind of 4D chess.
I don't think it's possible. He's not smart enough.
I think it's very much in the moment. I like to be clapped for, so I go out there on stage and I'm clapped for. I like to hear my name on TV, so if I say this, I'll hear my name on TV. And I think it's very simplistic and very id-driven, and there's no grand scheme of it.
No, that man has a classic lizard brain. He's only thinking about himself and his own survival.
And only in that moment.
And only in that moment. He doesn't have the intelligence to plot and plan. I really don't believe he does.
Yeah. And but even to have caused, which he'll never own up to, even think that he's responsible for, that so many people suffered. And then there was a way out of this, of that responsibility, where he can come out a hero still to these people, to more Americans than he deserves.
Isn't that something?
By saying we lifted the safeguards to get this vaccine out. I've got it. It's safe. The faster you get it, the faster we get back to normal, and you can throw off the shackles of oppression that is a face mask. But still won't do it.
He would still be president if he was smart enough to do exactly what you described.
Yeah.
Yeah. God.
Well, it's, I don't know if that, I mean, the vaccine didn't come, it wasn't like it wasn't available and announced until after the election. So
but I think if he would have admitted that the virus was what it was, if he would have been a true leader in that sense when it came to the virus, then I don't think he would have lost as many people as he lost. Because I do believe he did lose it. I don't think it's so much that I mean, people that did not vote for him, for the most part, knew from day one that they were not going to vote for him. But along the way, he lost so many Republicans because of his own stupidity and incompetence. I think that if he would have handled the virus correctly, it would have been enough for him to still be president today.
My own parents, who are lifelong Reagan worshipping Republicans, didn't vote for him.
And that happened a lot.
They are and they voted for Joe Biden. Yeah. And because Joe Biden seems safe. And it's so funny because Joe Biden is so much more progressive than Barack Obama was, but people hate Obama so much. And it's like, dude, he was kind of just more of a moderate Republican than people would want to admit.
Yeah.
But the racism is so strong in this country that even if you didn't agree with his policies, it does not equal the vitriol towards him that that most people have. Him being black just exacerbates that.
And that's the straight up truth. The straight up truth is that he's gotten a lot more resistance and a lot more pepper thrown at him because he's a black man. And a lot of white folks lost their mind, and the foolishness that was created by Reagan just came to a head when Barack Obama came in as president, and that led directly to what we saw over the last 4 years. Unfortunately,
I think for sure. I think white Americans had this sort of easing of since emancipation. Okay, they can have this, but no more. And this imaginary line. Okay, you can have this, but no more. Okay, you can have this, but no more. And through segregation, through Jim Crow, to civil rights, to more of an integration. And then there had to be a line in the sand, and Barack Obama's election was that. Yeah. And then that's when they went, but no more. But this time they meant it. Yeah. And racist, white racist.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. I think about an hour ago.
What does it look like in?
No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say, but in 20 years, what does this look like?
Well,
because now you have even Obama himself. I was listening to the interview he did with New York Times on their podcast, and he was like, "You have a generation who will grow up having a black president been normal. So it won't in 20 years. It won't be the same. Hopefully it's not worse."
I don't know. I guess I'm thinking a little more darkly on the whole thing, because like I said earlier, I don't think that I will see America come back to normal, whether it's normal, like when it comes to unity, when it comes to peace between us. I don't think it's going to come back to anything normal within the rest of my life.
That's
pretty dark, but that's what I feel.
I know what you're saying. At the beginning of the pandemic, I thought, when's the last time America was solidly, or when are times when we were solidly sort of on the same page? And it's either come in times of crisis, like post 9/11, or when we landed on the moon. And I thought maybe the pandemic is it. Maybe this is the time that we will sort of come back together and say, we need to protect everybody. We need to fight this. We need to win this war against the pandemic. And that lasted 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's sad.
And then
it's sad.
It is. And there was too much money to be made by the Tucker Carlsons of the world and the Rupert Murdochs to say, yep, we're all on the same page. We're going to get through this together, instead of, I'm tired of wearing a mask. It doesn't do anything. Here's my protest. And
do you think Tucker Carlson could make as much money as a nice guy as he does now as a complete and total jerk? Because I asked that because I think I don't know if Tucker Carlson is truly a bad guy, or is this is all this an act though because he sees what it gets him paid.
I'll tell you why it's not an act. I'm sure he pushes it because it is resulting in profit. But if you ever watch a this is a little bit of a spoiler. There's a documentary on HBO called documentary series called The Lady in the Dale. And if anyone wants to go in blind, stop listening. Just go watch it. I don't know how you feel. John.
They'll come back. They can stop, but they'll come back.
Yeah, I mean, stop listening to this part of it. Just fast forward a minute. And I don't want to spoil it for you, so I'm going to get your permission to continue.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So Lady in the Dale is about this car in the mid-70s that was developed called the Dale. And it was a 3-wheel car. The gas mileage was through the roof in the times of an energy crisis. And no one's ever heard of it. So you go into it, you think, oh, this is like Tucker, A Man in His Dream, or like Who Killed the Electric Car. Turns out the woman behind it was a trans woman who was also a con artist and had participated in all these cons throughout her life, and finally sort of like got this job through a bit of legitimacy and legitimately drove interest in it, but could not come through with the product. So they are within. So, and there's a lot of investigations. It was in Los Angeles in the mid 70s, and there's a lot of investigations into it at the time, both criminal and from the news media. And I don't remember if it was a news director or if he was an investigative reporter, but they're interviewing this guy who was involved back then. And most of the people they interview are respectful of their trans identity and are focusing on their actions and not their identity. But there's this one guy who is just deplorable in how they are discussing Elizabeth, I can't remember the last name, as a trans person. And refuses to continually misgenders her, acknowledge this. And I didn't put it together, even though the name was there, but the last name was Carlson. And then it kind of hit me later. Oh, that's his dad.
Oh.
That's Tucker's dad.
So this is where he gets it from. Okay.
And then it was like, okay, this is not an act. This is baked into his persona. And
that explains a lot. Yeah.
And if you watch the documentary, not knowing that, like as I did, and didn't put it together because why would you think that?
Yeah,
it's not top of brain. It was just, this guy is a real scumbag, even into his late 70s. But had I known going in, I don't think I would have. It would have just, I don't know, made more sense than his.
I was really hoping.
Man, we have gotten away from filmmaking talk, haven't we?
Yeah, I was going to say earlier, I think it was about like an hour ago, I was asking you about your trip, your journey from Florida to California. I don't even think we've gotten to California yet. We're probably hovering somewhere around Colorado on our way over to. Let me ask you this. To put us back on track. Well, first of all, let me say that we haven't come off track. We're just having a conversation. That's what my podcast is all about. It's a conversation. We have a general idea. I have reasons for wanting you to come on. I'm very interested in everything you do. But in that process of getting to know you, we wander a little, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But let me ask you this though. So, when you got to California, we've got you to California. Yeah, you found a place to live.
I'll tell you about the trip. It was very easy. It went up 75, made a right at the 10, drove for 3 days. Here I am.
There you go.
It was a very uninteresting journey.
That's a one-page chapter right there.
It was a very uninteresting journey across the country.
And so when you get here then, and you've got a little money in your pocket, what is the first thing you did to make money? Did you have to get some kind of side gig, or did you get right into writing a script, or had you already written a script?
No. There was, I mean, I'd written stuff, but it wasn't until I moved here, because I knew I wanted to go into TV writing right after film school, because my school was very much like, because of Blair Witch, in this model, focused on a model of entrepreneurial filmmaking, which actually kind of, funny enough, led to Vice Force in a way, but like a very DIY, do it yourself, finance yourself. One of my friends in school they established a grad program for our school right as I finished undergrad. And I had applied, but I didn't get it, even though I should have, because I was an alternate and then 2 people dropped out, but they decided just to go with a smaller program anyway. In retrospect, I'm glad I didn't. And I was kind of on the fence about it anyway, because I was like, I don't want to be here for another 2 to 3 years. I want to kind of get my career started. Yeah. So it was a blessing in disguise, but a few of my friends did go into it. And one of them, Danny, was made. So the thesis of your graduate studies was to make a feature film on a very small budget. So, which is not self-financed, but you need to find your own financing. And
how do you do that? That sounds so intimidating.
It is. It's impossible. I wouldn't say it's impossible. This was pre-crowdfunding. So
so who do you go to? Who do
you go to rich people. You go and you find a lot of people.
How do you find them?
Through connections and we had a number of financiers, and I say we, I'll get to that in a second, but you just kind of hit up the rich people, and
is that why networking is so important in Hollywood? You got to network. You got to meet people. You got to talk to strangers. Get to know.
But not so much in this instance. This is you're still in Florida. Okay, you need to find financing. Yeah. So it's hit up your rich uncle and his rich friends. It's find a doctor who has some extra money to burn. Yeah. Obviously there's it's they're in and they're first out. For return on investment, should your movie make any money? But, it's very unlikely that's going to happen just because of the nature of it. So anyways, so this friend was working on this project that he had started while we were in undergrad and was having some trouble and brought me in to help him write it. So we wrote this movie. And then for the year after, about a year and a half after I moved here, we went to make it in Utah, and it's available. You can get it on iTunes. Or is it iTunes? I know it's on Amazon. I don't know if it's on iTunes without looking it up. It's called The Attic Door. It's a quiet drama about 2 kids left alone in the Western wilderness around the late 1800s. And we made it for peanuts. Yeah. And so that sort of entrepreneurial filmmaking was what our school pushed.
Okay.
And that DIY. I've always been a fan of DIY stuff. When I was in a band, we were doing it all ourselves. We, financed our own demos and our own show. And there's just
there's more control of the process.
There's more control, but there's also a punk spirit to it where it's just we're just going to do this and fuck everybody else. Yep. And I love that sort of method of doing things.
Well, there's a certain kind of motivation in that you don't get if you've got,
and you have control.
Yeah.
You have creative control. You don't have to answer to anybody. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes you need somebody to sort of guide you. But Vice Wars was very much a DIY thing, and I love that. I still do love that bit of filmmaking, and I give sort of younger writers advice. It's if you are doing this as a writer, especially a writer who's not working or not a working writer, all you're creating is a PDF.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you just have a PDF that you send to people. But when you make something, here's something tangible that people will watch and enjoy or not enjoy or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I recommend, like, even if you just make something small, make something, because it keeps you going as a writer instead of just, here's a PDF I sent to somebody. And
I've always thought, though, that if someone writes a script that they believe in and they try to pitch it, and get it into movie format, and that doesn't work, does there ever come a point where you think, because I always thought that maybe they would try and make it into a book and self-publish that, or do you always just hold on to that script and hope that it hits as a film?
I mean, some do. Some people go and write novels. And,
because it's not that big of a step to
self-publish.
It's not that big of a step, is it? From screenplay to book.
It's a very different style of writing.
Yeah,
like scripts are so much more streamlined, but also like you're constantly finding a way to represent visually what that's the entire idea behind a script is like, this has to work visually.
Yeah.
So whereas on a prose page, you can just be like, John thought about whatever as he was making a sandwich. And like, how do John thought about his own mortality while making a tuna sandwich. You can say on the page and you get it. But sorry, I didn't mean to pick on you, John. I was just, it was the first name I thought of.
I felt a chill down my spine when you said my name and mortality. I was like, wait a minute.
I'm sorry,
what does he know?
I was just trying to find some like heavy subject. But like, how do you visually show that on screen?
I see.
You're making tuna, but how do you, other than going, I'm thinking about my own mortality, how do you represent that? So like, it's a very different way of writing.
What do you like best, writing or directing, and why?
I mean, directing satisfies that need of like seeing something come to fruition, and I always liked it during school. I mean, more so than the writing, because the writing is like, it's like just the drawing before you build,
Yeah.
And whereas like directing is building, but I think I'm a better writer than director.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah. But it's also so much harder to direct because it costs a lot of money to like put something together, as opposed to like, that's the advantage of the PDF is the PDF is cheap. It's, you don't need much to put that together. Yeah. So I think just for the sake of something coming to fruition, directing is more satisfying.
I see.
And it's more involved than like, because you're actually, you can put on the page and visualize that however you see fit, but now you actually have to implement that and turn that into a reality. So
have you ever written side by side with someone, or are all of your writings just
that film I was talking about that we made, that was a partnership in the writing sense, even though he was going on to direct and sort of driving it. Otherwise I've tried working with different people, tried writing with different people, and it's very hard because there are a lot of writing teams, especially in television. You really have to find somebody whose sensibilities and work ethic and method of working match your own in enough of a way to be able to function as a team.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do. And like, it's especially hard once you've kind of gotten down the road. And like I have these friends who are on the last show I was on, who've been a writing team for a long time, and they were in college and both part of a sketch comedy troupe and just started writing together then.
Yeah.
So now this is like, 15 years later, and they're I spent a very established and pretty successful writing team, but it's like, had they not started that in college and instead down the road in your career, it wouldn't have happened. And also it's not financially beneficial because of the way that
to write with another.
Because this is a point of contention with the Writers Guild contracts, is that if you're a writing team, you're paid as one entity, and then you split it however you see fit, which is almost probably exclusively 50-50.
Yeah.
So in a writer's room on a show, it's a little unfair because you have two people doing work, but they're only getting paid as one person. I can see because you get a separate fee. Like if you're in a room, in a writer's room on a TV show, each sort of like writer or writer entity goes off and writes a script, and you're paid separately to write that script.
Yeah.
So I could see if that was a shared thing because you're turning in one thing, but otherwise you have two people who are getting paid for the price of one. And it's not like they're splitting up their day. Like I'm taking the morning shift and you're taking the afternoon. And so it's a little unfair. So like that writing teams are this happens, that they're paid in this way. I mean, I think most teams in Hollywood would push for 2 salaries, but also accept like a salary and a half.
I see.
So they're getting paid 75%, but it's still better.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't want to overprice themselves because then they're not going to get a gig. But at the same time, they want to be fairly compensated for the work that they do. So they're kind of in a...
That's the key thing. It's to be fairly compensated. Yeah. And I think that's unfair. And it's interesting that the business is changing so much so fast right now because of streaming and because of like that there's so much content and there's so many shows but the shows don't last as long. Yeah. So it's a lot more people making less money than 10, 20 years ago.
That's a little rough, isn't it? How are you guys going to deal with that? Or is there no way to deal with it? It just is what it is.
I'm not going to say, I will never say like, oh, woe is me, because for the like, you know, if you're a TV writer, it's a great job, even though you might not be as wealthy as some people think you are. I mean, most people are squarely middle class, and most people at the lower end, like I am, you're still a renter. Up until, you know, you're kind of deep into it. But your job is like sitting around talking and making each other laugh, you know, it's especially in a comedy room, it's not anything to complain about at all. But because of the way it's changing, the large streaming services and company studios are like, sort of have the upper hand in not only contract negotiations but just compensation. So like part of writers' compensation for years would come in the form of residuals, which the way the residual system works is because it's an antiquated model. Say you write an episode of like Mixed-ish, like the last thing I did. And that episode, so that you get paid for that script. And then once it airs a second time, so your script fee includes first airing. The next time it airs, you get another 50% of your script fee. And then the next time it airs, you get 50% of that. And that continues until it reaches like a base point. And then it's just every time it airs. Okay. Now the airing is it's however many, it's not like it plays in Denver and it plays in Chicago and it plays in Atlanta and you get paid 3 times all the same night. But like if it plays 3 times in one market, then you get paid 3 times for that. So,
okay, gotcha.
Back in the day when there was syndication, when there was rampant syndication, these writers, you just made bank because, you know, an episode of like Home Improvement aired, or Seinfeld aired in syndication. It's still on in syndication. Yeah. You know, Larry David has more money than God. and I'm sure a lot of other, I mean, there not like there were a lot of other writers on Seinfeld there were, sorry. All the other writers on Seinfeld are doing pretty good for themselves, or at least did pretty good for themselves. Yeah. So, or Friends is another example, you know, and those are like the cream of the crop hits, but like there was more money to be. So now syndication doesn't exist. I was lucky enough to write an episode of Cougar Town, which was then on TBS. TBS very generously, and because of their model, would pay for 5 airings just up front because they knew they were going to air this at least 5 times because of their way that their schedule works. You know, they don't have a ton of original content, so they just replay stuff a lot. But like even that's kind of a dying animal. But like Netflix, you make a Netflix show and you're a writer on Stranger Things, there's no residuals because it's not airing at all.
Yeah, you know,
it doesn't technically air. It's you go and you decide to watch it.
Yeah.
So there's no back end in streaming. It's just everything you get up front. But the compensation up front is equal to like you get paid as much to write an episode of Stranger Things as you would to write an episode of like The Last Ship on TNT, but The Last Ship is going to air 4 or 5 times and you're going to get compensated for that, whereas Stranger Things is going to be watched by 100 million people and you don't see it. I mean, there's some baked in, but it's not very much.
And it all comes up front in that case on a Netflix.
Yeah, but it's the same amount.
Yeah,
you're not making any additional money.
No.
So it's become like you just kind of know this is what you're going to get paid, and you take these things and you hope to develop them. But it's also harder because I know I keep talking, but like
that's okay.
The streamers have found that unless it's like a mega hit, they don't gain any new subscribership past 2 seasons of a show. So like that's why you see a lot of Netflix shows, a lot of other shows get canceled after 2 years. Now if it's like a huge hit like Stranger Things or The Boys on Amazon or something, it'll keep going, but otherwise that's just not in it for them. I've been
wondering about that on Netflix, wondering if it's that these shows have gotten canceled because of lack of popularity, or are things just on hold because of Corona?
I mean, COVID definitely slowed down a lot of things and like, put on hold a lot of projects, but a lot of streaming shows just don't come back because they have a target of numbers, and none of it's based on advertising money, which which makes it even crazier because like ratings obviously drive advertising revenue. Because you can say, well, we know 1 million people watch this and it's this price, but 3 million people are watching this show. So if you want to advertise during that show, it's going to cost you more.
You know,
but this isn't ad-based stuff,
right? Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so at least with Netflix and like some of the other ones,
it's a Hulu weird platform. Netflix is a weird I mean, I like it, but it's just so weird. It's so different. I wonder if people are used to the differentness of Netflix contra traditional TV or traditional theater film. You know, there is no advertising there, and there is no. It's just. I think
when people who are of a certain age or younger, this is just how things work.
Yeah,
and you know, it's like Spotify. Like, if you can listen to anything you want at any time, and that was not like when I was a kid, that wasn't the case.
Right.
You had to like wait for it to come on the radio or go out and buy a CD.
Yeah.
And hopefully the rest of the album equals the $12 you paid to hear that one song whenever you want.
I miss that. I miss that expectancy. I miss that excitement of wondering what the album was going to be like. Yeah.
I do too. I miss digging through bins to find new stuff. It's so easy right now, and it's all algorithmic based. And there's just, it's weird. I mean, I hate it, but I love having the ability to stream whatever I want. I love that I don't have to load up.
But I see it on both ends. You know, I'm an avid listener of music, but I'm also a musician. And so there's a little bit of duality there. Yeah.
Well, Spotify does not pay artists fairly at all.
No, not even close.
Not even close. But like, you know, as a user, it's fantastic because I don't have to have a book of CDs in my car to listen to when I'm driving around running errands, So anyways, but back to the streaming services. So now you have, like, to come back to Stranger Things, that's done 3 seasons and made 25 episodes. And the first season was on Mixed-ish, we did 23 episodes. So, like, Mixed-ish has since been canceled, but if you are a show that's enough of a hit, like The Office or Parks and Recreation or Brooklyn Nine-Nine or whatever, you're doing, 5, 6, 7 times the number of those episodes. And it's, so if you are, it's job stability, and 2, there's growth on those shows because you can get promoted as the show goes. And then obviously the financial, of like having a successful show or even a show that just lasts. And the streamers are not making lasting shows. They're more interested in things that are going to bring in subscribers. Yeah. So it's like a whole different model, and it's tough navigating this and finding a way for writers to, like, and in other crafts too, to not take a huge pay cut compared to what they were making. Now, new writers, there's way more opportunities than there were 10 years ago. That's because there's so many shows, but you're not working as long, because of all these streamers, and they're all making their own content, but you're not working as long. And this isn't a thing that a lot of people don't think about because they don't know how it works. But when you're a TV writer and you work on it or on a show in any capacity, and you make, I don't know, say you make $2,000 a week, just an arbitrary number, doesn't mean you make $100,000 a year, because the show you're on might only last 6 months, and you might not work the rest of the year. So you're actually only making at $2,000 a week, $50,000 a year. So you're not wealthy until you get to, like, the top. You're just making a living, and people tend to think, oh, Hollywood, everybody's rich, and it's like, no, you have a city with a lot of renters and some homeowners, but homes are extremely expensive compared to the rest
prices
of the
are crazy there. Oh God, I don't know how anyone can handle it.
The next street over, like I said, I live in a very nice neighborhood, and these are homes built in the 40s and 50s, modest 3-bedroom, 2-bath, not a ton of land, going for 1.2, 1.3.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Wow.
Crazy. It's wild. And then you have property tax on top of it, which is very expensive here. Yeah. So, you're adding $1,000, $1,200 per month in property tax, that's why when the writer, like, oh, it's in California, like, you pay a lot of tax here, but you also get a lot for it.
Sure. Let me ask you something. When you were writing Vice Force, well, let's say when you were writing and then you go into the directing of it and the filming of it, what was the vision that you had as far as the success of it? How strongly did you believe in it? How much of a financial project was this, or how much, compared to how much of a labor of love? Because there's this thing. Go ahead. No, I was going to say there's this thing among artists. I see it among musicians and even among stand-up comedians, where they have very little thought that's put into the financial side of things. They just want to practice their art. Their focus is so far removed from the financial side of it that the financial side of it for some of them is never an issue, because they're not doing things to make that, to generate that income, to make that cash come in. It is truly just a labor of love. They just want to practice their art. Where are you on that scale? Where were you on that scale when you were making Vice Force?
I mean, it was 100% that. Like, nobody, I mean, the financially achievable projects that you are self-financing or even crowdfunding. We did about half crowdfunded and half self-financed. And the scale at which you can do that without being, independently wealthy, is you're making a web series, which are like ours, short increments, a few minutes at a time.
The episodes are like 5, 6, 7 minutes long, roughly.
We try to keep it to 4, but as the story progressed, they needed to be a little longer.
Yeah.
But it's longer as it goes on, which I think is a good model because instead of, I think, keep it as short as possible up front because attention spans are very short for internet stuff. Yeah. But ours is like a serialized story instead of just like, episodic. Here's some wacky situation that's going to go away. So I feel like if you're invested enough to get to like episode 4 where it starts to get lengthier, then you're going to be okay with the longer episodes as you go.
I thought it was very well put together. Very well put together.
It's funny because I watched a lot of web series leading into it. And I noticed trends, which were like, people would, I think a lot of people didn't necessarily go to film school like we did or have the same experience. So I think there was a lot of like, oh, this is how I think you do it, but it without realizing you can branch out. So a lot of shooting in apartments, a lot of shooting against your white walled apartment. And I would just, and not a lot of like visually interesting things. And they were so dull. Even if the writing was sharp and good and funny, it was just dull to look at. So that was the most important thing going into it for me. And like it was very much a labor of love. I never had any delusions about fast success. If anything, the only financial thing I wanted to come out of it was being able to make another season.
Which you're currently writing now, right?
Yes, writing. Then it comes, well, how do we get this made? So it might be another self-financing thing. Luckily, all of us are kind of like in a much better financial position than we were when we started. So maybe that won't be as difficult. But a lot of it, so it was all DIY. So it was like, how do you make this interesting without having money and without shooting in a place you have complete control over, which is your apartment? Yeah. So the first thing we shot was the first episode. And the DP and I went downtown and scouted, and we were like, okay, we know kind of like what we want visually, like just somewhere that somebody would dump a body, because that's the story. And like, where is a corner where we can shoot at and not be bothered and not be caught, which was the real thing. Like, how do we get away with this? Because the city of Los Angeles, as built around like entertainment as it is not friendly to independent filmmakers in the way you'd hoped. Oh. So like permits are very expensive. So being in Orlando, you needed a permit to shoot, but like for students, they were like $25 a day, $50 a day. It was so cheap. Here it's in thousands.
You're kidding me. What?
So like, no, and you need all these things to go along. But I mean, if you're shooting Law and Order, what's $1,000 to pull a permit? It's nothing. True. But if that's like 10% of our budget,
Right.
So we would go down there. We knew we would shoot on a Saturday or Sunday, so we went down there on a Saturday or Sunday to scout. I don't remember which now, and find like, where's the quiet corner where nobody's around. So we found this great location. And we're like, okay, the cops aren't going to come by. Hopefully nobody turns us in. Nothing's going on down here. And you can see in the first episode, there's train tracks in the back. So we got about halfway, maybe 3/4 of the way through our day, and the cops show up. Because we didn't realize we were on Union Pacific property, the Union Pacific Railroad, and they have their own police force. So luckily, they were really cool about it. And they're like, just finish. They can see you're not doing anything. Like, oh, we're making a cop show. And they kind of thought that was funny. Yeah. So they were cool about it. Never had another problem. That was as far as it got.
Well, that's good. They were cool about it. I mean, because they really could have jammed you guys up. Yeah.
Could have torpedoed the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the rest of the stuff, the locations were like, this is something that's very important in DIY filmmaking, is having the flexibility to go, okay, you have this scene and it's written, at a different location, but you might not have access to this location, but you might find something different or even better. Have the flexibility to write to that. And this is where writing and directing kind of come in handy, that you're doing both, but also being able to like refit what you're doing to whatever resource you have.
Got to have a lot of flexibility, a lot of creativity on the spot. Yeah. Yeah.
And after a couple, doing that a couple of times, I realized, we've got, this is going to have to be malleable as I go. So let's keep it to something that this scene can easily be moved somewhere else, because most of the scenes are just conversations that are happening, and they can happen in other places to wherever you have. So like the second episode, they go to this motel, and the motel was always written in there. But luckily we were a friend of a friend, their parents owned this motel in Bakersfield. So, which is 2 hours away, but we're like, well, we get it for free and we have control over it. So we're going to go shoot in Bakersfield.
There you go. Yeah.
So we shot up there 2 different days. We went up there, and then there's another scene where they're standing outside a gas station.
I love that scene, by the way. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but I love it. That was one of my favorite parts of the whole series.
Me too. Those are my 2 favorite episodes, 8 and 9. I think they turned out so good. But that scene waiting outside the gas station was originally back in that motel. And we were like, we're not driving another 2 hours to Bakersfield. This is ridiculous. It has to take place at night just because of the timeline. So we were very lucky and found this place in a town called Kneejerk, which is still a good 45 minutes drive. But the owner, and we went in, we talked to the owner, like, this is what we want to do. It's not going to take long. And he's like, look, as long as you don't mess with stuff, and I can see what you're doing.
Okay.
You can, once we close, you have run of the place. And he let us shoot in there like a half an hour before they closed. And we did the shot inside where they're kind of talking and walking through the convenience store.
Yeah.
And that's a oneer. Like just one tracking shot where they go through the whole thing out of necessity, because we're like, we can't set up lights in here. We can't do different angles and whatever. It's like we have a time constraint. So that's another way of being flexible. Is like, just get this as quick as possible. And it looks better that way.
Let me ask you something about the logistics of filming. Now, for example, that scene at the gas station, how many people are in the crew there to make filming a scene like that happen? How many people are involved?
Well, see, that's another thing that we had to be very wary of, that when we were shooting on location, and obviously I wish we had more resources, because everything can always look and sound and be better, but so a lot of times we had very little control over the stuff we had. So you can't rig up giant flags and bounce boards and lights to get exactly what you want. So a lot of it was shot with natural light, outside with natural light. The gas station was lit enough that it worked. And it still had the look of like you would expect it to look like, with the fluorescence, Yeah. I think on that day we had, besides our cast, we had our DP, we had a sound guy, we had makeup, and we might have had like one other person. So it was a very small crew. It was like 4 people. And and I think we shot pretty late, but I want to say it was probably like 4 hours that we got all of that.
Yeah.
Which was very run and gun. I mean, run and gun is like their modus operandi. It was, in our a lot of the key to success in doing that style of filmmaking is rehearsing beforehand. And because the rehearsal you can do it at home, you know, you have everybody in one spot, you run through the lines, you get everything you want. That your cast knows what to do. Yeah. So now you're just putting them in a different, maybe you adjust the blocking a little bit as you're going to figure out the shots. But it's just doing all that prep work gets you, and this is true even in big budget filmmaking, but getting all of that on sound before you go in is what allows you to get in and out.
I see. Yeah.
So a lot. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just saying a lot of prep and a lot of rehearsal and a lot of like seeing what works on the page and what's not, and like what does your cast bring to it that's different and usually better. Figuring all that out prior.
Now, was your cast members working on any other projects at the same time, or did you have 100% of their focus and time during the filming?
I mean, everybody had either day jobs or they had gigs here and there. Okay. That was another thing, is like, it was difficult to schedule because without the benefit of money and say, hey, you can take this day off of work because I'm going to compensate you for it. Yeah. You were doing it at the mercy of everyone else's schedule. So like, it took a long time to film. I mean, it took us a few years to kind of from start to finish.
That's a long time. That's a lot of dedication.
It's a lot of dedication.
That's a lot of belief. That's a lot of belief in your product.
It really is. And it's a really commitment to the cause. And that's kind of like another key to success in Hollywood, is just putting in the work and keeping at it, and just having that like fortitude and drive is so much of what it takes to make it.
I think about when you talk about it taking a while to get through the filming process. What would you have done? Or I don't want to jinx you. Maybe this isn't something to even think about. But what if Daniel or Taylor would have been like, man, this is taking so long. I've got another thing I could be doing.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up.
Sorry, Eric, I gotta go. You know what would you do then?
You mean like day of?
It just kind of comes up.
You schedule as best you can. You get everybody free. You get them to commit. If somebody, hey, I got a gig, I can't do this, then you go for something else.
I see.
I mean, for the most part, we kind of had like day commitments, like a few weeks out at least. So we know, hey, we're going to shoot this on Saturday the 24th, but overall commitment, that takes a lot. It takes more. And it's funny you bring that up, because that is why there is a change in cast 3 episodes in, because we had Mark, who was the these are the funny stories of making this, who was the other detective.
I'm laughing because I'm remembering why, how it happened in the program that he was removed.
He died.
Yeah.
So Mark worked in reality, and he worked on big reality shows like Deadliest Catch and stuff. And he got 2 episodes in, and we were getting ready to continue. And then he got a job that took him to Texas for at least a year. And we were like, well, you're going to come back and do this? And it just became clear, like, it wasn't going to happen with any regularity.
Yeah.
And his job, which is very successful at and has done well, didn't allow him the focus that it would have required and commitment. So at that point, we had to
kill him off.
Well, we had to make a decision. It's, how do we go forward with this? And so I had a lot of ideas. One was to just recast him and either never mention it, which it happens a lot on especially in the 80s and 90s. Famously the mom on
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah. The mom just changed actresses halfway through.
No explanation.
And so that was one of the ideas. I actually had a really funny idea, and I still would have loved to have done it, but we couldn't make it happen, which was that they're driving along and stop at like a 7-Eleven or something. And then the first guy gets out, is like, hang on, I'll be right back. Goes in, you don't even move the camera. After a minute or two, comes back and it's a different actor. Like, okay, let's go. And that's all you get. That's and never mention it again.
That's brilliant.
It would have been so funny, but it became clear that this wasn't feasible, and also like both actors, the prior and the latter, weren't as interested in like playing the same character, or like that character being played by somebody else, and then Daniel coming in and playing the same character, and also it kind of didn't fit. It just, I don't know. Yeah. So that was why it was born out of like, we're just gonna change the cast and we're gonna give this a reason. Yeah. And I think that like, I mean, ultimately the show was better off for it, because I think there was also like the first 2 episodes, there's not a huge differentiation between the two guys. They're kind of operating as you know, a two-headed monster in a way. And then having a new actor come in and this added story, because that's what it brought a lot of it to, was like, now you have like which is another trope, that like new partners aren't getting along. They're both sort of alphas, and then they learn to work together in the end. Yeah. So like that brought a lot to it, and it's it's funny because that 3rd episode and the 4th episode and all the scenes in the police station, but that was our last day of shooting. Okay. So, and it was the only day we had with Bob. So that was our biggest day by far, both most expensive, biggest crew, and most pages we shot. So that was where most of our money went to that day and shooting in that police station. But it, like, as a small project, had huge benefit to the show because it looks great. Our crew did an amazing job. And it was a police station set. So there's a studio, not like a Warner Brothers, but a small studio downtown that has all kinds of small different sets. So, you know, they have a bar set, they have like a hospital set, an office set. So they had this police station set. And we had toured a few of them, kind of like looking for one. There was one that was beautiful, and it would have been amazing. It was actually where they shot the pilot for Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Okay, yeah. And a lot of people don't pick up on this, but a lot of shows, like if you watch episode 1 of Brooklyn Nine-Nine and episode 2 and really pay attention to the set, you can see it's 2 different places. The Office is another example. Yeah. And there's small changes that are made because, you know, you shoot a pilot, you're not going to probably build a big set for one episode. Right. Go. Right. But then the show gets picked up and you're like, oh, we need a permanent home that we control every day.
There's so many small little things, the inner workings of making this stuff happen.
Filmmaking is logistically one of the most difficult, I think, professions out there. Like being on a producer who's what's known as a line producer, or which is usually like you're the logistics focused producer, is one of the hardest jobs and well compensated, but it's tough. It's tough.
It's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of logistics. A lot of logistics there.
I mean, it's huge, you know. And when you're doing it yourself, like it all falls on you to make do, you know. And like, and me as being the sort of like, you know, that role in this project. Like I'm not like pretentious enough to say I'm the producer too, because it's stupid. Why am I going to take a producer credit? Even though you end up doing most of that work yourself, or not most of it, a good chunk of that work yourself. It's why diminish credit from somebody else like Miguel, who was our producer. Why take that away from him? Because like he drove so much of this, you know? Yeah. And it's part of that responsibility still falls on you, but ultimately that's not your focus. So, right. And he brought so much of it just to fruition, more so than I could have ever done on my own. So big credit to Miguel.
So let me ask you in these we have about 7 minutes
Okay.
Going forward, is it too soon to start looking forward now? Is there things that you want to do to push this out there to get more people watching it? Right now it's available on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. There are. I mean, part of it is there's certain web series festivals that we're, submitted to and waiting to hear back from. Mm-hmm. But there's also different outlets. There's that sort of like will host these and these kind of shows. I mean, all of these shows, a show of the size of web series, it's up to you. That's the other part of the DIY is not only making it, but you have to promote it yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the most difficult part, because with so much pulling for people's attention, how do you get eyes on something?
You come on my podcast and you get a few thousand people, in Norway to watch you.
Yeah, and hopefully, the people who watch it like it, and they recommend it to somebody else, and the same, and you kind of just get that you grow an audience that way in this day and age. But like prior to YouTube, how did you get people to watch anything? You had to play in a film festival, and that was your only outlet. Like how many, probably tens of thousands of short films were made that either never got seen or played a festival a few times, and that was the life of them.
Well, how big and how active is this? Is there a forum? Is there a gathering of people who are, is there some kind of festival, whether it's nationwide or whether it's international, where there's a crowd that is there specifically for web series?
Oh, there's a number of festivals across the world. I mean, there's one in Minnesota that I think is first up. We're supposed to hear from. If anybody from that festival is listening, I would really like to be a part of it and be a part of your program this year and come to Minnesota. I've never been. And there's one in Rio, there's one in various parts of the country, and like these things exist, not quite as much as like a normal film festival. Okay. There's obviously way more of those that play like features and shorts, but web series are hard too, because you're not going to play the entire thing.
That's true.
Some festivals do, but like it's hard. What if
difficult.
You have an hour and a half of content? We're at like, I think 52 minutes with credits. But that's hard to program.
It is.
And our show is that we do have the benefit of just one story. So like you can sit there and watch 52 minutes and like you haven't seen, you're not watching various stories and like, but it's hard. So that's why it's like focused on, YouTube is like an ideal format.
Could you see yourself, I'm not sure how far along in the writing process you are to continue this, but could you see yourself writing this into a feature-length film format?
It could be. I've written a pilot version of it.
Yeah.
Which is just designed for like a half hour, which kind of like, takes some elements from what's there and expands upon them and, expands the cast and stuff. I don't know if you've seen the show Ted Lasso.
No.
On Apple TV. Highly recommend it. It's on Apple TV, like one of Apple's originals. Jason Sudeikis is the lead, and it's about a American football coach who is hired to coach a Premier League team, even though he knows nothing about soccer. And it's a very positive, uplifting show. It's very funny. But it itself was based on these shorts that they did for NBC Sports, where it was the same premise, but these are like 5-minute shorts, and no real story there. It's just kind of this character, and he's, it's just a goofy sketch. But that is expanded into pilot form, and you need to. So like that's kind of the same idea where I've taken this small thing and made it as if it were, written it as if it were to be a real show. And I don't know. It was an exercise. Maybe it'll turn into something. Maybe it won't.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's a lot of throwing spaghetti against the wall in this business.
So does that mean then that you have a lot of other scripts to other projects that are laying around that you haven't gotten out there yet? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have a couple other shorts I'd really love to shoot this year that are like 4 page. Well, I say 4 pages. That means nothing to most people. Generally speaking, a page of script is a minute of screen time. Yeah. It's not a hard and fast rule, but that's a generalization. So there's the little shorts that aren't continuing. I mean, I have another season of this. I'm in the middle of writing that we're not going to get to shooting before the end of the year, but just to be realistic, but that's okay. Yeah. Hopefully early next year. And then, I have pilots that I've written, which are samples. I haven't written a feature in a long time. I did when I first started, and I kind of lost interest in it.
Oh, really?
I do have an idea. I just was drawn to television more.
Yeah.
And like right at the sort of like coming out of film school, early career was sort of like the boom time for, I shouldn't say the boom time, but like the beginnings of like good TV.
Yeah.
Like you had Lost and you had Breaking Bad and you had Mad Men and shows were starting to become something then different than like what they had then.
Yeah.
And it became a different means of telling a story. So we became very interested in that. So
how long until we can expect to see the newest installment of Vice Force?
Well, like I said, we won't, if I'm being honest and realistic, we're not going to shoot before the end of the year. But ideally,
but that's just the beginning of shooting. How long do you think the shooting will take?
Well, that's the key thing. It's like having learned from doing this the first time, it was kind of like as available as we could is how we shot the first season.
But will you have a new focus now? A different focus?
Yeah, I mean, you have a different story, and I have a few like milestones, like milestones I know I want to hit, and scenes that I know I want to have, but the story itself is, I'm finding that right now. I know that we're going to move in a different direction, a little bit of a different direction that'll keep the spirit of the show, but it'll change it up a little bit. I don't want to spoil it because it's a big joke in the first episode. And if I don't, it's just better the less you know going into
don't
something.
Spoil it. Yeah. Don't spoil it.
Yeah. I'm not as pretentious to say like, oh, it's going to be all over the internet, but I just feel like anybody who's watching it would enjoy it more not knowing it's coming.
Well, I want to.
So yeah. So
no, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was
saying. So
yeah, go ahead.
Again.
I did it again. Go ahead.
No. We were both doing it. So yeah, that's the key. And so it's like going into it a second time, having done this before, I would want to like say, we're going to free up a month or 2, or 3, however long it's going to take, so we can shoot this as quickly as possible.
Just knock it out, right?
Just knock it out. Having all the elements in place too. We're not going to change cast. That's going to cost us a while. We're not going to, we're going to bring some people back. We're going to add new people, and so everybody that was in this first season is coming back to the second. They've already committed to it. No. Outside of our leads, I have no idea.
Well, I guess I'm talking about the leads. Bob and Taylor and they're coming back.
Yeah, they're all committed. I have a plan for the character of 9 Volt because he loves it too, and there's a way to bring him back.
I forgot all about 9 Volt. Man, that guy was something else.
Marcus, that's Mark Jacobson. He's so funny and he's so good, and you can see he's been working a lot lately. He's been getting a lot of of good parts on shows, and hopefully we can do this before he blows up, or Daniel Taylor too, and they're not available anymore. So, although I would rather see them succeed. So,
hey, if you need a new 9-volt, if you need a new 9-volt, I'll
Well, it's funny because Mark looks very different than when we shot this.
Oh, okay.
And that's going to play into his role in the thing. And that's kind of what I mean by like using the resources you have.
Yeah,
so it's like the idea originally, he was kind of like that Huggy Bear character who, you know, they keep coming back to for information, except he doesn't know anything. I mean, he knows stuff, but like, they're just like, we don't know how to, so, but once he kind of changed his image, I mean, he lost some weight, his hair is a little different. And I'm like, well, we can't have him be that character anymore. Yeah. So then it becomes, well, you write to what you have. So, that kind of gave me an idea. Yeah. So now that gives me an idea of what to do with him the next time, you know, and see, incorporate his transformation into your story. Yeah. And I think that that's true at any level. It's, if you're really like, I mean, if you're making a feature, you kind of have this idea of what it's going to be. And like, you can, if you have the money, you can cast and towards that. But especially when you're making a show, like, you have to kind of find a way, and this happens a lot on various like big budget shows. You sometimes have to find ways to incorporate the things from your cast into the narrative of your show. It could be something so simple as like, this character or this actor is a great singer. How do we bring that into our show? Or maybe or it could be something like, so I don't know, so simple as like, they have a scar on their face.
How did it get that? Scar? Yeah. Well, that's creativity. Like Michael K. That's good creativity and direction. Yeah.
And knowing that these are what you have, and how do you write to it, and how do you and I'm trying to think. I know Michael K. Williams like has this big scar across his face from I don't remember when exactly in his life he got it, and I know that it's been touched on here and there as part of the narrative of whatever he's on. Thankfully, it doesn't define all of his roles, but it's that kind of stuff that like,
if it pushes the story, it's worth writing a good piece to mention it and bring it into the storyline. Yeah,
totally. So anyway,
listen, man, it's 7 minutes after midnight here, and I have a half naked naked Norwegian woman in bed waiting for me.
Oh yeah, so you got to get to
that. She's only half naked now. She used to sleep naked, but the love is fading, so now she's only half naked.
Plus, it's probably colder than it is here.
Actually, it's really interesting how my body has adjusted to the temperatures here, because today, for example, it was maybe 67, 68 degrees. And
that's nice.
Yeah, but it's hot as you know what. It's hot to me now. If it's in the upper 60s, low 70s, man, it's a heat wave.
Oh, yeah. That's very nice. Right? It's like 75 here and perfect. Yeah. But come September, it's going to be, 100 every day. It's going to be miserable.
There's a lot of beautiful places. There's a lot of beautiful places in California, but I think the heat would kill me. I don't think I would be able to handle that.
Yeah, that's the key, is just being somewhere near the ocean.
Yeah.
Because it just keeps you cool. The desert is no man's land. I don't know how people live out there. Like Palm Springs, and it's 120 with regularity.
My older brother used to live in Victorville, and I just I don't know how he survived.
No, not for me. And I'm from Florida, where it's like hot and humid, but just knowing that I can escape to the ocean if I need to is key.
I love the ocean. I love it. Our place.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I've never lived more than 45 minutes from the ocean, and I never want to.
Yeah. I've come to love the ocean. Our place way up north on the island it's on an island, and it's the ocean is, 50 yards in front of our house. That's our front yard.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, love it. But listen, Eric, I enjoyed this conversation, but I'm going to have to ask you already to come back. I loved everything else. I loved everything else that we talked about. And for me to do a 3 or 4 hour long episode is nothing new. I've done that, but now it's late.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm happy to come back and hopefully we can find a time that's a little earlier for you.
Yeah.
Next time.
No, this is normally a good time. It's just been a long day. There's been a lot of media stuff going on. Like I said, the news has been contacting me a lot.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the hours now. But
no worries.
For those people who are listening, I want you all to know, Eric is only the first installation. It's going to be a series, if you will. I'll be speaking with some more of the cast members from this fantastically funny and incredibly entertaining, incredibly well-written web series called Vice Force Action Squad. So,
which is available on YouTube. Go just search Vice Force Action Squad. We're the only one.
You're the only one. I love it.
We're the only one.
Vice Force Action Squad. Straight ahead. No twists and turns to make. Type that in on YouTube. Watch that series.
And make sure you start with episode 1 and watch them in order.
And I have to say,
that's a key thing.
And I have to say, I sat and watched the whole thing straight through. Well, actually,
Fantastic.
The first day I watched the first 4 episodes, and then I had to stop because I had some work to do. But then I went back the day after and started over again with episode 1, and then watched it all the way through. And I'm
so glad.
People can do it however they want, but I recommend watching it all the way through. For me, it was so funny, and the storyline was so good. I had to get it all in. So for those of you who are watching or listening, I think that's the way to do it. Sit down, watch the whole thing, and share it with somebody. Put it out there. Tell people about it. This deserves to be seen by as many people as possible.
100%. I'm totally, and we're also on Twitter. At Vice Force AS on Twitter. We're on Facebook. You can just search Vice Force Action Squad. Reach us there. If you want to email us, it's viceforceactionsquad@gmail.com. If you don't want to talk to us, that's fine too. I totally understand. You've heard a lot today. But yeah, watch the show. That's the biggest thing. Watch the show. It's fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you, John, for having me on. I appreciate that.
Thank you for coming on, Eric.
You're welcome.
Don't hang up. I'm going to sign off here with my viewers and listeners, and then I'm going to talk to you for another second when I shut off the camera here. So that was today's episode of the Coming On Podcast with John Allen. My guest today was Eric Ernst. He is the writer and director of Vice Force Action Squad, available on YouTube. Watch it, share it, and then watch it again, and then share it again. Do that about, 10, 20, 30, 40,000 times, and help Eric and his gang have a little bit of success with this. Eric Ernst, everybody. Bye, y'all.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Okay, man.